Hi, I'm here to talk about a crazy subject, and that's called the work life balance in logistics. Some of you might say, huh? Well, I think it's something that we should just kind of talk about, and I always believe in having open discussions. So, without further ado, let's kind of talk about who I am and why would I be talking about this subject. Well, my name's Eric Bodelson, and I've spent 25 years working in IT in different fields of leadership. I've spent about 15 years working in logistics on and off. Um, I am a single dad to a small child and a dog, so that kind of makes me a qualified candidate for trying to achieve work life balance. Um, and Generally speaking, I love to debate and discuss and hopefully solve big issues as I see them. Kind of think of my mind as a giant think tank. I see a problem and I do generally want to address it when I see it hurting an industry that I do enjoy being in. And that's kind of why I'm bringing this subject up. But I'm also trying to present to you guys some things about myself and who I am. And to find out more about me, you can check out my website that I've built, um, bodelsonexecutive.com, and you can definitely learn a lot more about my management style and who I am and where I came from. So let's get to the introduction. Uh, the logistics industry faces many problems. Probably the biggest problem they do face, though, is personnel. The focus of this presentation is to start a conversation about the importance of work-life balance, explain the problems as I see it, and look at some solutions and some of the consequences. But for my objective, this presentation serves to reiterate the critical need for work-life balance in the logistics sector and highlight the gaps and potential solutions. By that, I mean we do have serious problems in this industry, and as I continue, you'll see what I'm talking about. This is meant to be more of a discussion than a presentation. It's based on my years of observations and working in this industry and my passion for wanting to make it better for people and provide new people or bring new people, new blood into this industry. And I think it's a bit of a challenge. It continues to be a bit of a challenge. This has been a long-term problem that we've faced. Um, the content of this presentation it is applicable to all individuals involved in logistics, from the frontline employee to the supervisor. But I'm really trying to aim it at the executives in hopes that they, maybe see the point. Maybe see some of these solutions. Maybe they have a discussion at one of the conventions, whether it be Freight Waves or one of the even the customs conventions. It really does need to be a discussion, and it's a problem that faces the whole industry faces. Um, the last point is I want to kind of give you a sense of how I manage people in problems because I am looking for a full-time opportunity with the right company. And I want you to understand that while this is a little outside of my wheelhouse, it's not about, you know, working in IT. It's all problem solving. It really is. It's a lot of problem solving. And this is a problem that plagues both IT and the logistics industry. And so I want to give you some thoughts and some solutions that maybe you might want to discuss. Maybe you bring it to your management. Maybe you take this video and say, hey, this guy's kind of talking and he's got some ideas. So, what is the problem? The problem is, as an industry, we have a 15% burnout rate. Um, Only 30 people in our industry have chosen this as a career path, which means, as I have stated and have heard every single time I've ever talked to virtually anybody in logistics, well, I kind of fell into logistics. That's not a great, you know, first impression for a customer, for example. I just kind of I kind of fell into this because, I saw a job and thought, hey, I can do that. Well, it's not always the best path if you have your mind set on things, um, to just fall into a career path that really can be more of a job rather than a career, and there's a big difference between the two. You know, thirdly, we have a turnover rate of 31%. That's a very high turnover rate in any industry. Um, it's not really acceptable. So let's look at, what parts of the problem can we solve? And by doing so, potentially bring in new blood that wants this as a career path. Um, and I have other videos that discuss this further. And maybe we can reduce the turnover rate and prevent people from burning out and going into different industries. If we do this and we do it right, people can achieve a balance of not receiving a phone call at 2 in the morning, which happens frequently in the industry. Um, you know, the other part of the problem is this. I mean, this is the perception that we have, in the industry. We have all seen these, engineer, teacher, programmer, logistics. He's not in bed because he's answering the phone. You know, uh, pressing your forehead can help alleviate stress while working. Well, I mean, it iterates the problem. And this is the perception that people have of the logistics industry. While some people might thrive on it, it's not a good idea because, back to that point, it leads to burnout, and it leads to high turnover. We don't need this to be, the standard. When you look at LinkedIn every day, yes, it makes me laugh. I'll tell you that every day. But this shouldn't be the standard. We don't want people. eh, I mean, I identify with these. That's the problem. I really do. People in logistics on vacation are like this. We are sitting there on the beach with our laptop or with our phone. We can't unplug because the industry doesn't allow us to, especially if we're people that care. And generally speaking, you have to hire people that care because they wouldn't do these crazy things if they didn't. It's a big problem. And if we don't clean this up and figure out a way to provide some balance, we will continue to be made fun of, continue to not attract the right people to this profession and this career path. So, who's involved in this? Well, everyone that's part of the logistics workforce, from the planners to the drivers and support staff, are affected by the challenges of work-life balance. You know, but the ones affected most are the individuals what on paper should be insignificant roles, the coordinators, the planners. Uh, and they're the ones most commonly faced with overcoming work-life balance challenges that can preclude them from, having families. Um, it leads to a much higher divorce rate, and it leads to, people resenting being with them outside of work. And it's a problem. It really is. We want I know I want people that want to be in the industry, um, that they've chosen as a career path. And I think they all want, to some degree, some balance. And I've seen it so many times in the industry where coordinators are getting phone calls in the middle of the night, uh, managers, DGMs, everybody's getting on, getting getting interrupted in their personal lives. Can't tell you how much that happens to me. Um, so we have to figure out limits, right? So let's look at solutioning this problem. It's a big one, and by the way, any solutions I come up with are meant as discussions. I'm certainly flexible. These are just my thoughts on possibly helping solve what I think is one of the largest problems we have. They're totally subjective, though, um, and I can't say that they solve everything. But I think from what I've observed people using and people doing, they help. So in order to do this, we have to have a unified effort. That means the executives all the way down through the coordinators to provide balance. Well, as you can see, this load has gotten insanely unbalanced. And that's how many people feel like that work in logistics. They feel like, oh, you know, my personal life is up here and my work life is down here, and that's just the way it is. Uh, and so, as a team, they're going to go in and figure out what shifted to make this container flip over, which I don't think I've ever seen. I couldn't find another picture of this happening in the real life, but I thought of it and I'm like, it's a great way to explain we need a balanced load when we're working in this industry. Let's utilize appropriate collaboration tools and foster a unified supportive work environment by implementing things like teams. Now, teams is a concept of you can have one coordinator manage an account. If we're working in freight forwarding, you can have one person managing an account, or 3PLs or whatever. You can have one person, but you want an entire team behind that account. So you'll see in the next slide, there's a reason for that. You don't just want one person managing the account. You need to divide the roles amongst several people. And what that's going to do is provide more collaborative effort. So we always also want to address and support the balanced needs of team members and ensure a healthy work-life balance by talking to them. Do they have plans this weekend? Did they have, something that they really wanted to do? And maybe when I get into it further, maybe we're not listening to them and their needs with regards to something that might be important. Now, emergencies do come up too, so we also have to be cognizant of that when we're working with people. But I think in a team environment, the load can be balanced, and we can provide a healthier alternative than what we have in many of the corporations that I've seen, which is one person per working with one company or one customer, or maybe it's 100 customers, but that person is managing all of those accounts and all of those shipments. And that's not a great way to do it, because now what if that person's out? What if, something happens? If you foster a team environment, you're going to get a lot more out of the way that we can manage everybody from I think honestly, if I was targeting it, I was going to say, if we're going to do this, this is more targeted at the younger generations. And it's not ageism by any means, it's how they work best. So, in supporting that balance, what I would suggest is implementing shared mailboxes um, for each one of your customers and assign those teams to the shared mailbox. Now that they might end up with 100 shared mailboxes in there, and yes, they do have to go check them. Um, but we can look at things like Copilot, and that can kind of help manage some of the load of the inbox as opposed to distribution groups. And there's reasons for this. We want to also look at other innovative tools uh, to improve the streamlined communications and task handling. So if we have a shared mailbox, and you have, I don't know, 100 customers in all of those different shared mailboxes with a team of 3 people, you need to figure out who people's done what, and so you can task these things and turn emails into tasks, and that might be a good way to manage some of the load amongst the team. Um, I the next one is embrace the strategy of rotating shifts. So in IT, uh, we have uh, historically, I've worked in several companies where we've had to embrace the strategy of rotating shifts because we're trying to support organizations or locations that are, uh, let's say, I'm in the East Coast, sometimes they're on the West Coast, sometimes they're in Hawaii, sometimes they're overseas. And if I'm supporting an organization like that, we have to figure out, especially if I'm a small company, we have to figure out how to best do that. Now, I've been in several situations where everybody was in the same time zone and we're supporting all of these other time zones. And so the question is, if an email comes in, do you just answer it? If you're not, why didn't you answer it? Usually becomes the next question. Um, and so I think a strategy of having somebody on call to manage emergencies in a team environment is a good idea. And what you do is you have them rotating uh, those teams as to who's on call that week or that day, depending on how you want to set it up. And it's a great concept to do it. You could do it daily. You can say, hey, I take Monday, you take Tuesday, you take Wednesday. That's fine. Where it gets tricky is when people go off on vacation and they don't want to answer at all. Um, and as they should. But it gets tricky when you do the daily who's on call uh, during those times, but it can be done. I leave it up to management, your organization's management to figure out how you want to do it. But I think the strategy of rotating shifts is a good one to equalize the distribution of work uh, that might happen overnight and the issues around emergencies. But also be cognizant. Sometimes, sometimes issues come up, and they might take hours to solve. In which case, make sure you do take the time if you're managing them to give them time off somewhere in between. And that's something I think is very important to keep in mind. Also, if there are people that are, accepting of accolades, make sure you give them some type of accolade if they're solving problems for you after hours. And it takes up several hours of their night. So, another solutions that really have to help if we're dealing with teams uh, is to Maintain shipment dashboards need to be well defined within the team because everybody needs to know what's going on. And this one's most critical, maintaining efficient and well organized SOPs around how they want to handle escalations and issues. So you need to proactively ask customers, well, if this is probably one of the most common ones, if a container shows up at your overseas suppliers or manufacturers location and the container is damaged and the door doesn't close, how do you want us to proceed? You know, do if it's a last minute load, do you want us to strap the door shut? It, it's these are the issues that happen all the time because they're not necessarily our containers, but these types of things come up. Or unfortunately, the truck got stuck in traffic and it didn't arrive in time. Sometimes customers need to know these things as they happen, and we have to figure out what is the right course of action. So we also have to have a published emergency and escalation escalation system, and empower staff or maybe even overseas agents to make decisions on behalf of customers. Yes, even at additional cost. I don't you we when you are running a forwarding operation or an agent-based forwarding operation, and you're in America, for example, you are on working with an overseas agent unless you have staff in that country. And you need to build the best partnership you possibly can with these overseas agents and maybe even give them access to the SOPs with on these customers, have them on a shared drive, so that they understand what the escalation procedure is. Now, will they do it? Yeah, it's debatable, but you can try and set those expectations because they're in a numbers game. There's not a ton of profit in this being an overseas routing agent. Um, and so it's hard to find great customer service where they're willing to do things and make decisions on behalf of customers. But it will help balance um, the work-life balance that this industry desperately needs. And having an escalation system too with those SOPs will empower the local person. And it could be maybe you have one person on call in the entire company after hours and handling overseas issues. Be able to make decisions on behalf of customers. And putting notes in the file or on critical shipments, marking shipments as hot is also very, very important. We also have to speak to the customers and manage their expectations. So, I think we need to ensure realistic and feasible delivery times to avoid the undue pressure of unrealistic deadlines with our customers. Now, that's not always possible. Some shipments are hot. We know that. But we need to understand the customer. We need to understand their predicament. We need to understand if they're trying to run just in time. That's a really terrible idea because stuff happens in logistics every day. we don't want to necessarily encourage that. They should have a month or two worth of product in their inventory at all times, uh, of whatever piece or part. If they're doing an assemblage, they need to have enough product to sustain themselves, so that when the boat is full, when the things are, things happen, we can actually help them um, figure out a different way if it's urgent or not. You know what I mean? But we want to ensure the realistic goals are met for them. And sometimes I see salespeople go off and just say, "Oh, well, we always run on time." Well, that's not the case. We've seen too many disruptions in logistics. We have seen too many issues. It is a big, big problem. Now, discussing and setting clear milestones and delivery requirements and making them visible to the customer is another big issue, because the reason customers call us and ask us where our shipment is because they don't have the visibility to see where it is. This is a problem that I can't solve overnight. Um, I can solve some of the problem by looking at some of the software solutions, but the ultimate solution will be to have GPS tracking on every container, on every LTL load. And that technology, while quasi available today, is not the solution that will be the solution tomorrow. And by that, I mean there's bigger solutions in the works that will solve that problem, and we can give them near real time visibility. And setting a clear escalation structure with both your customer and agent will also significantly help cut down on that balance problem that we have with the coordinators and with the management. Uh, you have to do this. It's so important, and and that's how we fix a big part of the work-life balance issue. Another solution is to deploy or employ staff overseas. Now, I caution you when you do this, you want to make sure that it's not a fish out of water story and the people actually blend in. This guy, poor guy, has showed up because he mistranslated a word, and he showed up thinking he was going swimming, and he is at the office in his bathing suit. Well, that's kind of a big problem, and these are the problems that we face if we're hiring somebody overseas. So it's a catch-22. If you're an executive and you say, "Okay, I want to hire somebody," who do you hire? Who do you trust overseas? Well, if you don't have anybody you trust, I generally say take somebody here that you do trust and put them in a role over there. But it's it's a big change culturally working with another country or culture. But I will say this, most countries are very welcoming to people doing this. Um, I can't tell you how many people that I welcomed personally from transplants that we had uh, working at one of the companies I had. And they weren't necessarily transplants, they were over here as trainees for a couple of years. And I made some great friendships by just working with them, teaching them, and working with their English skills even. And it has always been my assumption, because of logistics, they do get along better with people of people in foreign countries get along better with people that are from other regions, because we are international. And so you'll find they're welcoming if you do that route. Now, if you hire local, great. And let's talk about the benefits. Well, this puts some benefits of boots on the ground and can help you manage critical problems. So, if you have an agent who's not very customer service oriented, they might call this person in the middle of the night and say, hey, or in the middle of the day, their time, and say, hey, we have a container that door won't close. Well, sometimes you'll find agents don't make the call to the steamship line. At least if you've got boots on the ground, maybe they can do something and get in touch with the right people at the steamship line. Maybe they have relationships with them. Maybe they develop relationships with them. These are some big things to try and help navigate some issues. Um, Having a local representative fosters a stronger relationship with your overseas agents by facilitating face-to-face meetings. These are things that generally overseas agents struggle with. Um, you know, you're just kind of a number if you're a member of um, a big agency network. You're just kind of a number. Yes, I quoted this guy. Well, okay, but if you build a rapport with one or two big agents over there, or even the small ones, uh, you're going to have a better working relationship. You might not get the best rates if you go with the smaller ones, but you might have a better working relationship. Uh, You know, they this also gives people to the opportunity to attend industry events and maintain communications with them, and it can lead to improved collaboration and trust with you and the agent. A lot of times there's a lot of mistrust between agencies uh, because if you're members of those networks, you don't have those working personal relationships with them. Um, some of the last things it can lay the groundwork for potential office expansion and growth in new markets. It certainly can, but you have to be very careful. Like I said, we don't want this guy to be fish out of water. And if that's your objective, you have to navigate. You have to find the right person to navigate that very, very effectively without upsetting these agents and saying, "Well, what are you going to do? Take away my business?" Because it can upset them. So you have to play that card very, very carefully. The next reason would be it's way more cost effective than paying U.S. people overtime. um, it, it certainly can be, uh, and it can be more cost effective than paying a U.S. employee. Period. And final point is by distributing that workload across different time zones, domestic teams can achieve that work-life balance. Um, and only get interrupted if there really is a dire emergency. So, this will lead me to consequences. So, we we've seen the potential consequences come. Overtime legislation through the Fair Labor Act could be brought back up again. You know, it's already in there. Um, we know that the Fair Labor Act is an issue that the Labor Department continues to say needs to be addressed, and they could bring it back to what was a proposal, which was anybody making under $100,000 a year was subject to overtime. Well, if that's the case, you could be in some of you guys can be in a lot of trouble if we're paying coordinators to handle issues in the middle of the night. So the next consequence is burnout. Burnout leads to higher turnover, decreased productivity, and unhappy employees. These are facts. We know that. So if we can predicate some of that by providing some balance, we're going to have a happier, more customer service oriented team. Um, high turnover affects the quality of service, and it doesn't allow you to meet customer expectations when they don't have faith in the product that you're selling, which is having a person there to help facilitate your shipments. Uh, Finally, we're going to continue to have negative memes in the media. I mean, I can't tell you how many memes I see a day. I mean, some of those memes came from a podcast, an entire podcast on memes in the logistics industry. That's kind of ridiculous that we can't figure out how to balance work life. Um, and it needs, we don't want the egg to fall off. We want the egg firmly up there on the ground without the dominoes tipping over and lose the loss of customers. So the best way to do that is look at the problems we have, and we want to increase the recruitment and the people that want to go into this as an industry. A, because it's thought provoking. Number two, because it's a challenging job, and it's not just it shouldn't just be for people that said, "Hey, I saw this job opening," and that's how a lot of times it had happened, or a lot of times it was, "Hey, I work in this industry. You want to come and check us out?" And that's how they kind of got sucked in. But a lot of times they're not happy being there. And you find that out by working with this industry. So we want, because it brings new blood and new thoughts and new processes and new innovation, the people that work in the industry do want to work in there. And so if we can increase that new blood of people that have chosen this as a career path, we will be better in the long run. Well, I hope you got some value out of this. I hope you get a better sense of who I am and maybe a thought or two out of what this is. It's an opportunity to try and fix an industry that is, in my opinion, to some degree suffering. And I think it doesn't have to. I think the opportunities are there, even if you have to increase costs, and that could be done across the board if the logistics leaders got together and said, hey, let's provide some balance to this industry by increasing, our costs by 1%. While there's still going to be competition, we could do, something like that. But it takes, it really does take, it takes a collaborative effort to make these changes happen. And I think by doing this collaboratively, having a discussion, getting in a room, you're going to be better off than not doing anything at all. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you consider giving me a call, having questions. Just reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn or all social media, truthfully. But most likely I'll be on LinkedIn talking about or willing to talk about anything when it comes to big problems in the logistics industry. Hope to talk to you soon. Thanks.